All right, let's move on to chapter 3. We're really moving along here on chapter 3 already. And this is a chapter totally devoted to water and how important it is to sustain life now. But back in evolutionary time, billions of years, water was the only place where we know of life. We don't know of life elsewhere. All life existed in water and I guess existed because of the properties that we're going to talk about with regard to water. There are basically four emergent properties that water exhibits that is conducive to life. So let's move on, even though this picture is pretty gorgeous with regard to this little turtle. Going back to what we talked about in the chemistry chapter in terms of polarity, and we're going to talk a lot about, we're going to not talk about polarity, but refer back to it often, as well as refer back to those hydrogen bonds. Now, remember, water is a big oxygen molecule, oxygen element / molecule, same word, and two hydrogens. And they are held together in covalent bonds that are nonpolar. Nonpolar because the oxygen is pulling more on the electrons that it is sharing with the hydrogens than the hydrogens are pulling on it. So you have a negative charge toward the oxygen side and positive charge towards the hydrogen sides. Well, what the hydrogens are going to do is they're going to actually be attracted to the oxygen that's next to them. So you have this oxygen compound, H2O compound, and each of those individual compounds are attracted to each other because of this polarity. And we call that attraction hydrogen bonding. And that sets up the explanation about several of the concepts that we're talking about in this particular chapter. So polar molecule, and actually, you know, going back to giving a little bit more of a shout out to water, you know, a build up to it. All organisms need water more than any other substance, water. Actually, you can go without food for quite a few days, actually a couple weeks. Can't go without water for very long. So you need water. Water is makes up most of us. And in terms of cells, we're about 70 to 70% water, depending on who you're talking to. You have water inside the cell, cytoplasm. You have water outside the cell. That's not something we've talked about yet, but we will. But you have the fluid environment inside the cell and outside the cell, all water. It's the main reason that life on Earth is inhabitable, why we have life on Earth. Every time you hear about some other planet that we're exploring, one of the first things they look for is, have they found water? Is there water there? Because if they find water, if they think water's there, if water had been there, then there's a good chance they will find life there, or so the theory goes at the present time. Talked about polarity, and we talked about the hydrogen bonding. And you have a nice picture here of this hydrogen bonding. The other thing, please to understand, is the oxygen and the hydrogens are fairly, I don't want to say stable, I guess maybe stable, fairly stably bonded to each other. These hydrogen bonds, so this hydrogen that is attracted to another water molecule, these are temporary. They're happening quicker than a blink of an eye. So they are bonding, and then they are the bonds are broken. Bonding, and then the bonds are broken. Bonding, and the bonds are broken. So it's not something that particular bond, whatever bond, that hydrogen bond you're talking about at that time, that is very, very temporary. The four emergent properties, and remember we do like lists, because lists, just FYI, lists are highly testable, I guess you might say, in a multiple choice question or a true-false question. So in some form or another, it may not be just in this particular arrangement, but water is cohesive. We'll talk about what cohesive is. It also has a certain adherent property, so cohesive, and that's because of this hydrogen bonds. It has the ability to stabilize temperatures because of the hydrogen bonds. It has the water expands when frozen because of the hydrogen bonds. I know it's a broken record. And it's the universal solvent, not so much because of the hydrogen bonds, but because it's a polar molecule. So I guess kind of in a backhanded way because of the hydrogen bonds. So these are 4 properties that water has that isn't found in any other compound, in any other substance, and they are all needed for life. This concept of cohesion and adhesion, what you have is in any water system or any life system, ours included, you have nutrients and gases that are carried in a fluid substance. Think of your blood. And with regard to your blood, we think of blood as red and viscous, etc., but it's mostly water, to tell you the truth. Plasma, you take out the formed elements, so you take out the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. You have plasma, which is mostly water. And that's a fluid medium for nutrients such as glucose, gases such as oxygen and carbon dioxide to be carried throughout your system. And particularly with regard to a plant, if you think you water the plant is in some dirt, and in that dirt you have roots, and you water the dirt around the roots, and what happens is the water is taken up via the roots, and eventually somehow or another, magically, not really magically, but scientifically, gets to every leaf in that root, every square foot of that plant in the leaves. Cohesion is the way this happens. What you have is the water, is the design of plants such that there's a water pathway, and this water pathway actually is almost like a closed system where water is going to go up into the plant, and because of this cohesion, which the hydrogen bonding, which is again very temporary, as well as the adhesion, the H2O molecules attaching to the wall of the plant, and these are just channels that you have, this water is going to be taken up from the dirt because you have molecules evaporating at the very tip. So the leaf has is open out into the sun. It's taking in sun so that it can do its photosynthesis and create energy. Well, at the same time that process is going on, you actually have water evaporating into the air. And that then makes room for another water compound to move on up, and that forces that water up into the plant, all parts against gravity. And this is because of hydrogen bonding. Those hydrogen bonds cause those water compound molecules to stick together as well as adhere to the side of the plant walls. Surface tension is another unique property of water. The hydrogen bonding takes place wherever there is H2O molecules, but when hydrogen bonding and those H2O molecules come in contact with a different type of surface, then there isn't any hydrogen necessarily in the surface that the water is near. In this case, we have water coming in contact with the atmosphere, and the hydrogen bonds hold tight into the water surface. So this creates a tension or almost a film where it takes a certain amount of force to actually break that film. Now you and I can break it hands down, but the little spider is so light. The little spider can actually walk on the top of the water because of surface tension. Again, the surface tension is because of the attraction of the hydrogens to another oxygen, not the one that is bonded to, and that creates almost a little film in the relationship between water and air. So surface tension. And that's important for a plant life that actually does need to walk on top of the water to find its food source. And then you have here, I should have moved on to this when I was talking about, so you have water coming up the roots. And again, it's almost like a circle, but I mean, it almost is like a cycle. But because that evaporation's taking place at the tip, that makes room for more water to actually be absorbed up. Almost like it's a string that you're pulling out. You have a ball of string in the dirt of water, and you're pulling it out as you pull, as the molecules are evaporated out of the tree. Another molecule comes up that is in the pipeline with regard to from the dirt. And you also have a nice picture of the conducting cells that you find in plants. These are the channels that actually allow for water to flow upward. Next property of water is its high specific heat. So its ability to stabilize temperatures because of hydrogen bonding. I know I'm a broken record. But moderation of temperature. We would not be able to have life on Earth if we had these extreme temperatures. And water, which by the way covers most of our planet, or most of our planet is covered by water, stabilizes large bodies of water because you have evaporation. Well, first of all, let's define what temperature is. Temperature is the measurement of, or the average measurement, I guess, of kinetic energy. And kinetic energy is defined as the energy of motion. And we're not talking about the motion of the, I guess, you know, you could be talking about that, but we're talking about the motion of the individual molecules. So heat is the measure of the total amount of kinetic energy due to molecular motion. So, you know, if you see the waves, I mean, there's something acting on that, but we're talking about the actual, in molecular level, the motion of the molecules measured. As they move, they're particularly with regard to hydrogen, you have these bonds going on between the hydrogen of a bonded oxygen and the one that's next to it that it's somewhat attracted to. So this creates a movement not only of these compounds, but also bonds being formed and broken with regard to hydrogen, which is constantly causing motion to take place with regard to on the molecular level. We are scientists, remember, and we measure things. So getting back to temperature, we measure temperature in calories, actually in Celsius, but a calorie is the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So we are going to raise water 1 degree, so we are going to measure it in what we are familiar with, but calorie is the amount of heat. And sometimes when we talk about human life and the ability to create energy, we think of that in terms of calories ingested. But that's how that particular word is defined, is the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius. And specific heat of a substance is the amount of heat that needs to be absorbed or lost for 1 gram of that substance to change its temperature by 1 degree. So it's kind of related to a calorie. The specific heat is related to a calorie. And we measure specific heat by calories per grams Celsius. So 1 calorie, 1 gram of water, 1 degree Celsius. And water resists its changing temperature because it has a high specific heat. We'll pick this up on the next portion